Hey everybody, what's up, man? Hold the truth hostage. Where if the truth was so important, we wouldn't negotiate with lies. We would hold the truth hostage. Man, wow. You know what I'm saying? 2026. As predicted, man. You know what? You know where we are at now? We are at the era of, silence of the men. You know what I'm saying? Silence of the men. You know what I'm saying? You know that movie how you had Silence of the Lamb. Now you're at the state of silence of the men. You know what I'm saying? And it's something where it was already predicted, man. The men are at the point where talking, negotiations are no longer an option, man. You know what I'm saying? I've been saying this for years that once the men accept the laws for what they are, you know what I'm saying? Once the men accept the laws for what they are, it's pretty much over. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty much over. Once the men accept the laws for what they are, the men will basically accept that there is no negotiating, unless the men are going to be lobbying to change the laws and have the money to change the laws, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to be doing nothing. And where we're entering into society wise, you're having a mass silence of men. You know what I'm saying? I told guys with full-time ghosting, and I made a recent video, zero is opportunity. You know what I'm saying? And what happens when men start full-time ghosting and basically have zero attachments at all, beyond themselves. You know what I'm saying? Men are returning to the only priority that matters is themselves. You know what I'm saying? Which is the natural way men deal with things anyway. Not this scam you've been trained with to the point where you don't even hear the word mankind anymore. You hear he's such a good human being because they don't want to credit the fact that society's movement and society's stability is man-made. You know what I'm saying? Man-made. So now you hear all this mankind. You don't hear mankind no more. You hear human being. You know what I'm saying? You hear human being, you hear mental health. The combo. You know what I'm saying? The combo, human being, mental health, or whatever. But what's happening is, man, you're having a mass silence of men. And what you're going to see as we head further towards 2030, you know, you're going to have more men get silent than ever before. You know what I'm saying? And there's no negotiating. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. Their negotiations are completely off the table. You're going to see people still trying to make content, dating and all those relationship things, but as with what's happening with the fact that they're saying over 70% of Zoomers aren't even in the pursuit of a date or relationship. You know what I'm saying? What's happening is men are accepting their role in society. Men are accepting that they've been deemed the ones that are, not to be investigated or not to investigate the issues men are facing, you know? And from what I've seen, and you could look it up, you know what I'm saying? All you gotta do is look at the faces and the races they've put as, you know what I'm saying, the faces of was it toxic masculinity. The face of toxic masculinity has been what? White and black men, you know what I'm saying? And of what is their religious background and everything. You know what I'm saying? Then you have for over, what is it, man? For over 20 years, the country's been predominantly fixated on replacing the citizens here. You know what I mean? Replacing the citizens here with foreigners that would basically just accept what's given to the from them from the government, because compared to where they're from, it's not as bad at all. You know what I'm saying? So the country spent, I think, over 30 years on replacing, because I remember, what is it? You know, Spanish class was an elective, right? You know, you had to ask for Spanish class or whatever, but now it's become mandatory. You know what I'm saying? Think about that. The country spent all this time easing the Spanish language into a must have for a country where, you know what I'm saying, the people who found independence spoke English, you know. People who maintained the country spoke English, but they spent over 40 years in pursuit of replacing and demonizing the you know, the main language of the country, which was English. You know what I'm saying? I remember I came in here, you know, had to learn, go to ESL to learn English. You know what I'm saying? But now you can't even find a job if you're not bilingual. You know what I'm saying? Think about that. You're in a country where the main language and all the signs are in English, but you can't find a job if you're not bilingual. You know what I'm saying? That's the insanity. But, you know, let's move on from that. What's happening is men are basically operating in mass silence. You know what I'm saying? And the men are talking amongst each other. And even then, when men are talking amongst each other, there's a lot of vetting. There's a lot of vetting going on between men, where men are like, I don't know if I could talk to this guy. He's too absorbed into the system guidance. You know what I'm saying? He's too absorbed into the system guidance. So, you know, this is a major thing. A lot of people, and I made a video, No New Friends, probably 2 weeks ago or whatever. But a lot of people don't understand that men are at the point, because so much antagonism is placed on being men, and how easily it is for others to frame a man as toxic masculinity. You know what I'm saying? You know, demonize a heterosexual man. A lot of men are vetting each other to the point where men aren't even making friends anymore, because men are looking at friends and saying, if there's any sign that this man is too self-absorbed in the system guidance and has been too emasculated, it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk of even talking to this other man or trying to make friends with other men. You know what I'm saying? That's where we're at right now in this society, that a lot of people are ignoring, is that even men amongst each other aren't gonna be forming friendships like they used to. Because, you know, back in the 2000s, if you disagreed with another guy, you know, you might have ended up on MySpace, maybe, rarely, or they might have taken you out of their MySpace top friends or something. But it didn't spill out onto the internet and turn you to content. So a lot of men, even though it's been framed that, you know, men aren't approaching women because they don't want to be content, a lot of men aren't approaching or trying to speak to one another either. You know what I'm saying? Because since the internet has just become a way to consent towards the criminalizing framework of men, a lot of men are also looking at their fellow man and saying, man, is that even another man I'm talking to? Or is that just another emasculated man, so emasculated to serve the system, so I'm going to stay away from him? You know what I'm saying? And another thing is men are basically multi-layering their the way they associate with one another. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, you would see, let's say 2000s, you would see men become great friends through video games, great friends through mutual interest. You know what I'm saying? But what's happening now is that a lot of men are realizing that, you know, we're at the point where there's not much room for personal interest. You know what I'm saying? That's why I keep saying full-time ghosting. There's zero attachments. Zero, the biggest one, zero idealism. You can't idealize friendship and what that means. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men are now becoming associates to one another. A lot of men are realizing, well, you know, this guy knows what he's talking about on business. You know what I'm saying? On business. So I'll associate with this other man for business reasons. Because if I try to talk to this other man from a standpoint of we're trying to be friends, then I might get exposed to something that shows that they're in so much favor of the system that I'll lose access to a business associate. So a lot of men are basically creating a layer where interests that used to bring them together, you know what I'm saying? Personal interests, video games, business, whatever, it's now becoming strictly that business and that interest, you know, nothing more. So there's a lot of men from that standpoint that will be avoiding each other due to that risk that even other men can turn you to content. You know what I'm saying? Turn you to content to be, you know what I'm saying, targeted and ridiculed online. So a lot of men are realizing, and I said this years ago, you're gonna have a rise of emasculated men, or as I call it, the pink pillar, men that basically identify and seek to synchronize to the women in the society that's as anti-male as possible, and making them basically a threat to your own safety because they'll identify with everything they see going on within the system. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men are avoiding that as well, you know, and a lot of men with, like I said, with zero as an opportunity, a lot of men are realizing that, man, you know, with zero, what do I have to lose? You know what I'm saying? A lot of men are realizing if you have so-called a one friend or something, or you try to get, you go from zero, you know, to go from just associates on business and so on to try to be friends. Now you're reaching for one, and you can lose one. You know, you could lose from one, but with zero, you can't lose nothing because you have nothing. There's nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men are realizing that the zero is the meaning of peace. You know, zero is the meaning of peace. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need to gather or go from zero. You know what I'm saying? You got to maintain that you have zero attachments. You know what I'm saying? And zero attachments, zero liabilities. So a lot of men are realizing that that's the safest thing they can have is zero. Nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? Nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? Because the risk of something to gain is higher than the worth of something to gain. You know, so a lot of men are invested in zero. You know what I'm saying? So, and what's happening right now is there's a silence of men. Men are realizing, you know, what I said is men start, I've been saying this for years, look at the law, not her bra. Look at the law, not her ass. Once men look at the law, and I said this years ago, what is the law? The law doesn't talk. You know what I'm saying? The law is just written on a piece of paper. And it is what it is, the law, right? You know, the law has been passed and men are reflecting the laws. And this means men are absolutely silent. You know what I'm saying? And men are moving in a way where men are only investing in their business, you know, where they put their money. Why you think crypto? Why you think all this talk about stocks, investment? Why you think Kalshi? Why you think sports betting? Why you think all this stuff is going up? You know what I'm saying? Because the men are realizing, hey man, that's the only place you can invest in, where you can make a lot of your choices is your investments and your future and what you're trying to achieve with these investments. It's not through talking to others, you know what I'm saying? And after Conan 19, you know what I'm saying? After Conan 19 quarantine, where a lot of men were forced to basically live through the quarantines a very introverted life. You know what I'm saying? Men were forced to arrive at the point where, you know what, being introverted is safe. You know what I'm saying? It's extremely safe. You know, it's the safest thing a man can focus on. You know what I'm saying? Is introversion and just focusing on themselves. And what that's created is a man that prioritizes introversion as a state of safety and a solution to any issues they could potentially face. So a lot of men now, man, have seen so much value. That's why you see all these videos about my peace and all that stuff about my peace and stuff like that, because men are arriving at the point where the only person that, you know, if you're not about getting embarrassed, if you're not about becoming content online, the only person you can trust is yourself. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to post yourself online looking stupid unless you want to. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men are going silent. They're reflecting what the law is. The law is silent. You know what I'm saying? The law just exists. And a lot of men are realizing while they're here domestically, they'll just exist in silence. You know what I'm saying? They'll do their own thing, you know, they'll joke around here and there, but the mass majority of men will just keep moving in silence. Men will be loud during investments, during some gambling, maybe some competition, competitive. But what you're having is the silence of the men, you know? And I've been saying this for years, you know, full-time ghosting. As more men will become basically, dang, I forgot the word, but like a ghost, where society can't grasp, you know what I'm saying, can't put a hand to grasp the men. You know what I'm saying? Society can no longer grab hold of men because there's the word I remember, they're intangible, they're ghost. You know what I'm saying? They're ghosts, and everything the men will be idealizing will continuously ensure they pull away from it. And what's happening to the men right now as they recenter around themselves is that the men are arriving at a state of absolute control. You know what I'm saying? The absolute control is when the man is moving for himself on his own. And when that happens, and that's the natural state of men, you know what I'm saying? Like I've been saying, they put all these scams out there. We all need to socialize and we all need to have others around us. For men, that's a lot. You know, men will gladly go venture out on their own for over 10 years and they might come back to society. You know what I'm saying? So that whole narrative of them emasculating men by saying we're human beings and we must socialize. You know what I'm saying? The same men that could go to work for 12, 15 hours, you know what I'm saying, 20 hours work all day and socialize with no one, just do their job and come home. You know what I'm saying? Or the very same men that could be a rancher at a farm and just deal with animals all day. You know what I'm saying? There's so many ways to reflect and provide evidence that that whole narrative that men need, you need interaction with other human beings. We're social creatures. You know, that's the funny aspect of when they say we're social creatures. They don't count that we socialize with our pets, our animals. You know what I'm saying? Or we socialize with nature. We socialize with the world. You know what I'm saying? They never add that. You know, that wondrous nature of mankind, and you know what I'm saying, that nomadicism. You know what I'm saying? That nomadics that you know, exists with us, you know what I'm saying, and how we pursue life. You know, they don't want to add that one up. You know what I'm saying? That we do that. We focus on that. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men, man, a lot of men right now are locked in and focused on that, and they're pursuing in the domestic setting silence. You know, the men will become more silent, and because, you know, loud socialization, and men will still go out there to drink, enjoy themselves. You know what I'm saying? But what the men will be doing is strictly enjoying from their perspective. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's happening right now, as predicted. This was predicted by me over 5 years ago. And you're seeing that all they're saying men aren't pulling up to women, men aren't active. Where are the men? The men are basically existing in silence. You know what I'm saying? Silence of the men. You know, that's what men are doing. Men are going to work, come home. They might go to the bar, enjoy themselves. And another thing is men aren't drinking like that anymore. You know, a lot of one major thing they didn't take into account is that a lot of men were drinking, you know what I'm saying, because marijuana was illegal, and another thing is a lot of the men were still lost in pursuing you know what I'm saying, the lies of society and that system guidance. So a lot of men aren't even drinking that much anymore anyway. And if the men aren't drinking, and remember, there's not many locations that allow you to just, you know, roll up and smoke some weed anyway. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of the men are realizing, man, I could just grab some weed and smoke at home and chill at home. Do me, you know what I'm saying? Or chill with some of the homies, talk, you know, talk about life, sport interests, whatever. So a lot of men are just, you know, locked in and focusing on their interest. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the men, I said this years ago, a lot of men are having zero compromise, where there is no room for compromising at all. Only time men will compromise is business related, you know what I'm saying, business interest. You know what I'm saying? And another thing is, the men have realized, and I've been saying this for quite some time, for years. Men have realized that all of these social media, these influencers, these so-called political influencers, man, they're all plants. They're all a part of that system guidance. Because even now, I always tell guys, look at change.org. You know what I'm saying? You see all these so-called all these so-called manosphere guys and men that want to help men, but not one of them has a change.org. They don't collab to have a change.org to let men vote and show what their interests are. They won't even create a change.org, you know, to alter things. So men have realized, man, while you're here, and I've been saying this for damn near over 5 years, it's work. Just go to work, make your money, invest in your money, and then go home. That's it, man. That's what a lot of men are investing in. Go to work, go home. You know what I'm saying? Go to work, go home, and understand that unless you have the resources, the money to lobby and have the laws changed domestically, nothing's changing. And a lot of men are moving and accepting that this is a sexually segregated society. You know what I mean? This is a sex-based segregation society. And really, it's really a hetero limitation. You know what I mean? Male, they're limiting, damn, what's the word? Is it prejudice? A prejudice to heterosexual men. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of men are realizing that this is how it works, man. Get your money, bro. Get your money. Don't zero compromising, your manhood, and understand that those that are attached to this system guidance are a threat to your, you know, your existence as a hetero man. So heterosexual men. So a lot of the men are realizing, yeah, man, I could get my job. And a lot of men are realizing you only interact with people where you have to, which is your job. If you have a job where you have to interact with people, that's it. The rest, you go home when it's within your control and then work towards having absolute control with your finances in your life. You know what I'm saying? So that's what's happening. And the thing is, it's going to get more silent, far more silent than ever before, because as the men will be taking this sexual segregation in their spaces as well. You know what I'm saying? You have a situation where women used to make some money in male spaces. The men will soon look at a space where the women are allowed to venture into their space and their interests as a trap. You know what I'm saying? As a trap to pull them back into system guidance. So a lot of men will be pulling away from any space that has to do with male interest that the females are forced into. You know what I'm saying? Trying to force feed interaction with the men and women. You know what I'm saying? And this silence of men will only, will only further eclipse what's going on. You know what I'm saying? By 2030, because we're on the road to 2030. You know what I'm saying? 2030, where it's not just the women will be single. It's gonna be both sides. Except the difference between the men and women is one side is permanent. If the men by 2030, over 60% of men are single, and you know what I'm saying, over 60% of women are single, the difference between those numbers is there's more women than men, of course. But the other difference is that if men are single at over 60%, and let's say it's the men are single and they stay away from the women from age, while the women are aged, let's say 18 to about 29. You know what I'm saying? So about 11 years. So imagine the men are single as the women age. You know what I'm saying? 18 to 29. The women just age out. You know what I'm saying? The difference between the men and the women is that, let's say, for example, the law changes. Let's say the law were to change, the women aged out. You know what I'm saying? Say 11 years pass, the women age out and the laws change. And let's say the women turn, let's say about 18 to 30. So the women turn 30, the men turn 30, and the laws change. You know what I'm saying? You think the men are going to go in mass towards the women out of 30? No. The men have also accepted that, over sexualization is just a normal option now. You know what I'm saying? It's a normal option for the women. So what would happen is, let's say 18 to 30, the men are dating. You know what I'm saying? So the women go 18 to 30. Now the men are 30. What's going to happen if the law change? You're going to see the men go for women 18 to 25. So all the women about 30 plus, they'd be removed from the table anyway. So, you know, there's a lot going on. Like, I've been saying this for years. The men can afford to wait. You know, the men can afford to play the waiting game. You know, you know what I'm saying. And the other thing, we know men are flying overseas and all that stuff. But yeah, it's the silence of the men. You're not seeing men gonna go on streams. Of course, you'll see those clowns that are trying to get views, and those aren't even working anymore. You know what I'm saying? How many times can you interview OnlyFans models and Instagrammers, female influencers, and that don't even qualify to be in a long-term relationship and expect men to react and give you views and clicks? So a lot is changing as the men go silent, and the thing is, it's gonna be every month to weeks, it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse as the men accept the silence. You see, what's gonna happen is the men are going silent and the women will get louder. You know, they're gonna get louder. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna see more breakdowns as we've seen now. You can see videos of women literally, what was it? One went viral a few weeks ago about a woman crying her heart out, whatever. And the men now understand, you gotta understand everything that happens to a woman now, the man compares it and accepts that she's basically in tears for a man who not only didn't want her, your Chad, Tyrone, whatever, but also because she doesn't do anything beyond the bed activities. You know what I'm saying? Beyond the bed and being an expense and a liability. You know what I'm saying? It's funny how you see all these videos where these women are crying and the man left, but these women don't say they cooked them anything. They don't say they did anything for that man beyond being, a date. That's it. I used to tell guys that one of the biggest flaws of these PUAs is PUAs basically were training men to be in a forever date stage, constantly dating. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? I remember, what was it, Rollo Tomasi with one of the dumbest quotes said, "You got to keep gaming your wife." Or was it Rollo or some idiot, another idiot in the manosphere, in the PUA sector? So a lot of men have realized that, that's where the women are at. The women are at an endless date. They don't want to do anything personal with you. They don't want to be with you in any scenario where you're not at a restaurant, you're not a vacation, you're not buying things. So it basically means the women do not want to exist around you if you're not spending money. Even though relationship over 95% of the time between you and that woman will just be spent sitting around and comforting each other doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? Maybe some intercourse here and there, but all it will most likely be is y'all sit amongst each other and enjoy each other's company. The women from the projections do not want that at all. They actually look at a man trying to establish a personal, private relationship as basically the most disgusting thing a man could offer. That's why these personal dates with coffee dates and so on, they're not happening. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot going on, man. There's a lot going on, and as the men, I say with full-time ghosting, it's not an option. It's the only choice. And as men basically are ghosting one way or another, you know what I'm saying? Once the men accept that ghosting is the natural state that they must ghost everything. You know what I'm saying? Except themselves. You know what I'm saying? So it's happening, and the men are going silent. The men are going silent. Silence of the men. And like I said, the men will just get more silent. You know what I'm saying? For women to see men, it'll be I work with men. That's what's happening. It's gonna be she works with men to get attention from the men. She's got to go to work just to potentially talk to a man or be in a location where that man can't ghost her. A man can't ghost a woman at work, right? You know what I'm saying? They work in the same place. He has to be there. So that's what's gonna happen. You know what I mean? That's what's gonna happen, and it's gonna get louder. It's gonna get louder, and the women will get louder and louder. They're alone, but as loud as the women get, just as they said, they'll choose the bear. Women are getting loud, saying men won't stay with them when they don't offer the man anything that stays. There used to be a saying where the quickest way to a man's heart was through his stomach. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people thought, oh, that's just about cooking. No, it's about creating a scenario where, what I'm saying, the man is with you in a state of absolute comfort where the man can trust you with a meal. You know what I'm saying? A man can trust you with a meal he hasn't even seen you prepare, because the man knows that you're feeding him and preparing food because you care, and your relationship now is beyond just sexual in the bed. It's now about pleasing that man off the bed, which is cooking, cleaning, showing you care for that man, walking with that man, just enjoying the company that y'all both share. You know what I'm saying? Y'all both share, but now men see those are not on the table. Those options are not on the table. You know what I'm saying? What's happened is the women are like cashiers. You know what I'm saying? Cashiers, and the man is basically the wallet with the cash. You know what I'm saying? And what's happened is, as they've stripped the women with that level of morality to where all they can do is spend. They see the relationship with a man is basically how much he spends. It's not about spending time with her, it's building trust and so on. No, it's about the definition of the relationship is all based on how much decayed faces he spends that on paper. You know what I'm saying? How much money that's spent. That is the relationship now. So, and then you add in the laws. We know the women have the legal advantage, so they don't have to listen to the men at all. Men have zero authority. So what's happening is that, man, with the men accepting this rate, like I said, the men are becoming like the law, silent. And the other thing is the men have zero attachments and zero liabilities, zero idealism. And the men are looking at zero as opportunity. That zero is the meaning of freedom, because you have nothing to lose with zero. You know what I mean? So we're at a situation where the men and women legally are incompatible. On a moral level, they're incompatible. You know what I'm saying? What is the marriage rate now? 30% or less of Americans are married, and it's going to continuously drop. It's going to drop further and further. You know what I'm saying? I think by 2030, it should be less than 20%. You know what I'm saying? Because the decay is going to increase. Because as not only about the females divorcing the men, but as more men see how normalized being single is for men, and how men are basically claiming that the only free man is a single man, you're gonna see, and it's been rising anyway, men filing for divorce. Men realizing that cheaper to keep her, and I've broken that down years ago, isn't cheap. It isn't cheaper, it's a trap. And as more men realize and step forward towards that path of singledom, you're gonna see this get louder and louder and louder. You know, it's, silence of the men. You know what I'm saying? And what's happened now is the relationship perils or relationship issues women have is just become humorous comedy for the men. Fiction, comedy. But yeah, man, this has been my thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Silence of the men as men full-time ghost. Men head towards full-time ghosting. But this has been Hold the Truth Hostage, where the truth was so important, we wouldn't negotiate with lies, would hold the truth hostage. Full-time ghosting isn't an option. It's the only choice. Full-time